Get out. This isn't your home anymore. Your brother owns it now. Those were the exact words that came out of my parents' mouths as I stood in the very kitchen I painted for them with my own hands just last summer. Can you imagine giving your whole self to something, only to be erased in a single sentence? Stay with me as I take you through what happened, and if this story connects with you, show some love by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others who believe family should mean more than betrayal. My name is Ayanna Brooks. I'm 26, steady, responsible, and I've always felt deeply tied to the land we called our country home. That house was more than wood and paint. It was my childhood, my sacrifice, and my safe place. For years, I worked quietly to keep it standing. I paid the bills when my parents fell behind. I handled the repairs when storms ripped through the roof. I planted flowers to bring life to the yard. I did it because I loved them, because I believed family was worth the effort. But standing there that day, none of it mattered. My parents looked at me without hesitation and announced that the home would be signed over to my younger brother, Malik. The golden child. The one who never lifted a finger, who always found a way to fall but somehow landed on a cushion I had helped stitch together. I remember my chest tightening as the words hit me. I couldn't even believe they said it so easily, as if they had been rehearsing it behind closed doors. I asked them why. Why would they take everything I poured myself into and hand it over to someone who never cared? Their answer cut me sharper than a knife. Malik deserves it. You'll be fine on your own. He's the one carrying our name forward. I wanted to scream, to remind them of the nights I skipped meals to make sure the mortgage was paid. I wanted to throw every receipt in their faces, every act of loyalty they had ignored. But the weight of their cold eyes told me the truth. They never saw me. They never wanted to. So I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I gathered my things into bags that didn't match the years of effort I had given. My heart cracked, but my pride refused to let them see me break. Malik stood at the door with that smug smile he always wore, as if this was his victory lap. I stared at him one last time, memorizing the arrogance in his face, and then I walked out without a single word. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I drove away, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror. My eyes burned, but deep inside, something else was forming, something stronger than grief. If they thought this was the end of me, they had no idea who I really was. When I think back to my childhood, I can still feel the summer air brushing against my skin as I sat on the old wooden porch, swinging my legs and listening to crickets in the tall grass. Our country home wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I remember picking peaches from the backyard tree, sticky juice running down my arms as my father laughed and told me to grab another basket. I remember patching fences with him, learning how to hold a hammer steady, my small hands blistering but proud. That house wasn't just walls and windows. It was where I built myself piece by piece. But even then, the cracks in my place within the family were showing. Malik, my younger brother, always seemed to glide through life. Where I had to earn trust, he was handed it without lifting a finger. My parents spoiled him in ways they never considered spoiling me. I got lectures about responsibility. He got keys to a shiny used car the day he turned 16. I got silence when I brought home good grades. He got celebrations for passing classes he barely studied for. Somehow, everything he did was framed as special, while everything I did was treated as expected. There were nights when I worked long shifts at a diner after school, saving my tips to help cover property taxes. I'd slip the money quietly onto the kitchen table, thinking I was doing something good. And yet, when relatives came over, my parents would smile proudly and say, "Malik is the reason we're keeping this house afloat. He's the one carrying us forward." I remember standing there frozen, wondering how my name had been erased from my own sacrifices. I wanted to correct them, to shout the truth, but I swallowed my words, believing maybe silence was stronger than begging for recognition. The imbalance only grew as we got older. Malik wrecked the first car they gave him, and instead of punishment, he was rewarded with another chance. He skipped family chores, missed curfews, broke promises, and each time my parents smoothed it over with excuses. Meanwhile, if I came home 10 minutes late from work, I was scolded for being irresponsible. If I dared to ask for help, I was told to figure it out myself. Looking back now, I realized the betrayal didn't begin the day they told me to leave. It had been simmering under the surface for years, woven into the way they saw us, the way they chose him over me again and again. That moment in the kitchen wasn't a sudden storm. It was the final drop of rain after a lifetime of clouds gathering above me. The truth hit me like a quiet thunderclap. I hadn't just been pushed out of my home. I had been slowly written out of my family's story long before I ever packed my bags. And that hurt in a way I still can't put into words. I remember the way my hands shook as I stuffed my clothes into trash bags. It felt wrong, almost insulting, to reduce years of my life into flimsy plastic that could tear at any moment. Every fold of fabric carried memories. My prom dress, the hoodie I wore during late-night study sessions, the jacket I bought with my very first paycheck. None of it felt like enough to take, yet I couldn't carry more. The house that I had fought to keep alive was no longer mine, and the weight of that truth pressed against my chest until it was hard to breathe. I moved slowly from room to room, fingertips grazing the walls, remembering echoes that still seemed to linger. The hallway where I used to run as a child, the kitchen where I painted the cabinets just last summer, the living room where laughter once filled the space. Now it was silent, cold, and unwelcoming. I tried to hold on to the warmth of what once was, but it slipped through me like sand through open palms. As I reached the front door with my bags, Malik was waiting. He leaned against the frame with his arms crossed, that smug smile painted across his face. His eyes held no sympathy, no sibling bond, just victory. "Don't drag this out, Ayana. You knew this day would come," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. For a moment, I thought I might break. The urge to scream at him, to shove the truth in his face, burned hot inside me. But I stayed silent. I studied him instead. Every curl in his hair, the smirk that twisted his lips, the way his posture radiated entitlement. I wanted to burn the image into my memory, so I would never forget exactly what kind of man he had chosen to become, and what kind of brother he had never been. I pushed past him without a word. He didn't move to help me carry my things, didn't even pretend to care. The gravel of the driveway crunched beneath my shoes as I walked toward my car, the bags dragging against my arms. I opened the trunk, slid in the essentials, a box of books, a few personal keepsakes, and the trash bags that now held the pieces of my life. When I closed the car door, I sat for a moment, staring at the house. The windows looked back at me like hollow eyes, stripped of the warmth they once carried. My chest ached, but I forced myself to turn the key. The engine hummed to life, and with it came a finality I hadn't wanted to face. As I drove away, I kept my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. The house grew smaller and smaller, shrinking until it was nothing but a blur against the horizon. My vision blurred too, but I refused to let the tears fall. I had left without a word, but inside me, something sharp and unspoken promised this wasn't the end. The first night in my studio apartment, I sat on the edge of a mattress that lay directly on the floor. The walls were bare, the ceiling fan clicked with every rotation, and the only light came from a single lamp I bought at a thrift store on my way in. It was small, too small compared to the wide rooms I had grown up in, but it was mine. That thought gave me a strange kind of comfort, even as loneliness pressed in from every corner. Atlanta moved fast, and I had to move with it. I found work at a construction design firm, a job that demanded more than I thought I had to give. Early mornings, late nights, endless deadlines. I poured myself into learning everything, determined to prove that I was more than what my family had tried to make me believe. I worked on blueprints until my eyes blurred, attended site visits with my hard hat crooked on my head, and often fell asleep at my desk with pencil marks smudged across my cheek. The work was exhausting, but it gave me something to hold on to. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was building something for myself instead of pouring energy into people who only took from me. Each project I completed added another stone to the foundation of the life I was trying to create. Still, the loneliness crept in. Nights were the hardest. I'd come home to the silence of my apartment, heat up leftovers, and stare out the window at the city lights. Sometimes I caught myself thinking about the country home, how the porch light used to glow, how laughter once spilled into the night air. The ache in my chest would return, sharp and deep, but I refused to let it break me. Slowly, I began to find my people. A colleague named Jordan noticed how often I stayed late and started leaving takeout boxes on my desk with a note that said, "Eat." A project manager, Denise, invited me to her house one weekend, where I found myself surrounded by laughter that felt real, not forced. They became more than co-workers. They became the family I chose, the ones who saw me for who I was and appreciated me without conditions. Piece by piece, I began to heal. I learned to celebrate small victories. The first time my name was on a project presentation, the day I could finally afford a couch, the evening I came home and realized the apartment no longer felt like a cage but a home. The pain of my family's betrayal never fully left me, but it no longer defined me. What grew in its place was something stronger, resilience I didn't know I had. I was no longer the girl begging to be seen. I was becoming a woman who built her own place in the world, brick by brick, heart by heart. It was a Sunday afternoon when I got the call. I hadn't heard from Kendra, an old friend from our childhood church, in years. Her voice carried that mix of curiosity and hesitation, the kind that makes you brace yourself before the words even land. "Ayana," she said carefully, "I don't know if you've heard, but Malik, he's not doing so well." I sat there in my little apartment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence as I let her words sink in. She told me about the parties, the wild, reckless gatherings Malik threw at the country home, the same house I used to scrub clean every spring. Strangers filled the porch I once painted, beer bottles scattered across the yard I used to tend, and music rattled the windows deep into the night. It didn't surprise me, not really. Malik had always loved attention, always needed an audience. But something in her tone told me this was bigger than just parties. Kendra went on to explain that the house was falling apart. The roof leaked, weeds strangled the garden, and the paint on the shutters was peeling. Repairs went ignored while Malik focused on living like a king in a crumbling castle. My parents, desperate to keep him afloat, had begun draining their savings to cover his debts. Bounced checks, missed payments, whispered arguments. Everything I had worked so hard to prevent when I lived there was now unraveling because no one cared enough to maintain it. I thanked Kendra for telling me, hung up, and sat in silence for a long time. My emotions twisted together like knots I couldn't untangle. There was bitterness, sharp and burning, knowing that the home I had sacrificed so much for was being destroyed under Malik's careless hands. There was sadness, too, because no matter how much they hurt me, it was still my family, and I couldn't help but grieve what they were losing. But beneath it all, there was something else, a grim, quiet sense of justice. I remembered the day they told me to leave, their voices so certain as they insisted Malik deserved the house, that he was the one carrying the family's name forward. And now, here he was running it into the ground. Their golden boy was tarnishing before their eyes, and no amount of denial could hide the truth. That night, I sat by my window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. I thought about the girl who left that house with her life crammed into trash bags, heartbroken and erased. I thought about the woman I was becoming, the one who worked late nights, who built her own place brick by brick, who no longer needed their approval to breathe. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless when I thought of that house. Instead, I felt a shift, like the universe had quietly started balancing the scales. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. The first time my boss handed me the lead on a project, I almost didn't believe it. I had spent months staying late at the firm, redrawing plans until my pencil snapped, double-checking measurements until my eyes blurred. Every small detail mattered to me, because I wanted my work to speak for me in a way my family never had. So when Denise, my manager, slid the folder across the table and said, "Ayana, this one's yours," I felt something ignite inside me. For once, someone saw me as capable, not invisible. I threw myself into the project, guiding a small team through the redesign of a downtown office building. It wasn't easy. Deadlines pressed down like weights, tempers flared during long meetings, and some doubted whether I was ready to lead. But every time I walked into that site with my hard hat on, I carried myself like I belonged. When the building finally opened, polished and strong, my name was in the credits. I didn't cry in front of anyone, but later that night, alone in my apartment, I let the tears fall. They weren't sad tears. They were proof that I was becoming someone my younger self would have been proud of. With every paycheck, I became more disciplined. I cut corners where I could, packed lunches, wore the same heels until the soles thinned, skipped vacations. Slowly, my savings grew, and with them, a plan began to take shape. I started looking into rural properties, the kind of places most people overlooked. Old houses with peeling paint and sagging roofs, homes that sat waiting for someone to care again. The irony didn't escape me. I was doing for strangers what I had once done for my own family, restoring what others had abandoned. But this time it was different. These homes didn't come with strings attached. No one could tell me I wasn't enough or hand my work to someone else. When I patched a wall, planted flowers in the yard, or repainted a front porch, I knew the effort was mine alone. One by one, those forgotten houses came back to life. Some I sold to young couples starting families. Others I rented out to people who needed a fresh start. Each key I handed over felt like proof that I could create beauty and stability on my own terms. My success grew quietly. I didn't brag, didn't post pictures online, didn't call my parents to show them what I had accomplished. There was a certain power in silence, in keeping my victories close to my chest. I wasn't chasing their validation anymore. I had finally learned to validate myself. At night, when I walked through one of the restored homes, smelling the fresh paint and hearing the floorboards creak beneath my steps, I realized something. I wasn't just rebuilding houses. I was rebuilding myself, piece by piece, into a woman who no longer needed anyone's permission to rise. The news came to me in fragments, whispered through the same grapevine that had once carried stories of Malik's wild parties. At first, it was just small talk. He had missed a payment or two, but nothing serious. Then the whispers grew heavier. The mortgage was behind, bills piled high, debts stacking like bricks around his neck. The golden boy's shine was fading, and with it, the house began to crumble. I didn't need to see it to know what was happening, but in my mind, I could picture it perfectly. The porch I once painted with fresh white boards now sagged under neglect, rotting at the edges. The shingles on the roof slipped free, rainwater seeping into the bones of the house. The garden I had tended with my own hands, rows of flowers and herbs that once gave the place life, was now overrun with weeds, choked until nothing beautiful could breathe there. Every corner of that home carried my fingerprints once, and now it was slowly decaying under his carelessness. My parents, who had so proudly handed Malik the keys, found themselves scrambling to keep him afloat. They begged the bank for extensions, pleaded for mercy, drained what was left of their savings into the black hole of his debts. But no matter how much they poured in, it was never enough. Malik's parties continued, his reckless spending never slowed, and the house slipped further out of their grasp with every passing day. The irony was cruel, almost poetic. The same voices that told me to leave, that told me the house belonged to him because he was carrying the family name, were now cracking under the weight of their own decision. They had built Malik into something untouchable in their eyes, and now they were watching him burn everything down. I tried to ignore the updates, to keep myself detached, but when Kendra called again one evening, her words pierced through me. "Ayana," she said softly, "the house is going to auction. Public foreclosure sale. It's all over town." I froze. For a long time, I couldn't even respond. The thought of strangers bidding on the place that held every memory of my childhood made my chest ache. It wasn't just wood and stone. It was summers on the porch, late nights fixing leaks, the quiet pride I once carried. And now it would be sold off like it was nothing more than property on a list. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, staring at the plans spread out on my work desk. My career, my new life, everything I had built for myself. It all stood because I had been forced to leave that home behind. But now fate was handing me something I hadn't expected, a chance to step back into the story. The house that was taken from me was slipping through Malik's fingers. And for the first time, I wondered if it might be mine to claim again. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat. Rows of chairs creaked as people shifted, clutching their number cards, waiting for their chance to bid. I walked in slowly, my heels clicking against the floor, my tailored suit hugging me with a confidence I hadn't always carried. I had worked for this moment, built myself brick by brick, and now I was ready. Across the room, I saw them. My parents sat stiffly, eyes darting around the crowd, shame written in every wrinkle on their faces. Malik leaned back in his chair with a forced smirk, but even from where I stood, I could see the panic hiding behind his bravado. Their golden boy was no longer shining. He looked small, desperate, like a man who had realized too late that the world wouldn't keep bending to his will. I took a seat in the middle row, straight-backed and calm. The auctioneer began his cadence, voice rising and falling with practiced rhythm. One by one, properties were called, numbers lifted, gavels fell. Then came the address I knew by heart. The country home, my home, the one I had painted, patched, and loved until it was ripped away. The opening bid was called, and hands shot up around the room. I stayed still at first, listening, watching. My heart thudded in my chest, but my face betrayed nothing. When the numbers began to climb, I lifted my card with steady hands. Heads turned, murmurs rose. I didn't flinch. The bidding grew fierce, numbers jumping higher, voices overlapping, the room buzzing with energy. Each time someone raised the bid, I countered without hesitation. My voice was steady, my hand unwavering. Malik shifted in his chair, his smirk faltering. My parents whispered frantically to each other. clutching papers that meant nothing against the weight of debt they couldn't cover. And then it was down to me and one other bidder, a man in a sharp gray suit who clearly wanted the land for profit. He raised his card, upping the price by thousands. I didn't blink. I raised mine higher. My pulse raced, but I refused to let it show. This wasn't just business. This was reclaiming something that had been stolen from me with words that still haunted my nights. Get out. This isn't your home anymore. Finally, the man in gray shook his head, lowering his card. The room hushed as the auctioneer raised his gavel. Going once, going twice. The crack of wood against wood echoed through the chamber. Soul. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. And then, slowly, eyes turned toward me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed, steady and sure, as the reality settled in. Legally, officially, the house was mine. I stood, smoothing my suit, and caught Malik's gaze. His face was pale, his arrogance shattered. My parents looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. But I didn't look back for long. I had no need for their approval. The house that once cast me out had returned to me, not through their grace, but through my own strength. The first time I stepped back inside the house, the air smelled like mold and neglect. The walls I had once painted with careful strokes were cracked, the plaster peeling in strips. The wooden floors sagged beneath my heels, groaning like they remembered me. My heart clenched at the sight of the kitchen. Cabinets dangling from broken hinges, the sink rusted, the counters chipped where I had once scrubbed until they shone. I traced my fingers along the wall where my childhood height had been marked in faint pencil lines. All of it ruined, discarded, left to rot the way they had tried to leave me. The front door creaked, and I heard hurried footsteps. My parents and Malik stumbled inside, their voices tense with urgency. My mother's eyes darted around the room, her face crumpling at the decay. But it wasn't sorrow for the home. It was fear of losing it. My father's jaw was tight, and Malik looked different now. His swagger was gone, his clothes wrinkled, his face drawn thin. Ayana, my mother's voice cracked. Please don't do this. Don't take it away from us. We're family. The word family burned in my ears, as sharp as the night they told me to leave. I turned slowly to face them, my hands resting on the banister I had once polished every weekend. The same banister Malik had leaned on smugly when he was crowned their golden child. You want to talk about family now? My voice was steady, but my chest ached with years of swallowed pain. Where was family when I spent nights patching leaks in this roof, so you wouldn't wake up to water pouring over your heads? Where was family when I worked double shifts to help with the mortgage, only for you to hand the deed over to Malik like I was invisible? My father's mouth opened, but I cut him off. The words had lived inside me too long to be silenced now. Every time I begged for a little recognition, you dismissed me. Every time I sacrificed, you called it my duty. Every time I asked if I was enough, you told me without words that I wasn't. And the night you told me to get out, my voice trembled, but I didn't stop. I did. I left without a word because that's what you wanted. You pushed me out like I was nothing. My mother reached for me, but I stepped back. Malik finally spoke, his tone desperate. We made mistakes, Ayana, but we can fix this. Don't take the house. Don't take it from us. I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin. You didn't lose this house because of me. You lost it because you thought I would stay small forever. But I didn't. I grew. I fought. I built myself into someone who could stand here today. Their eyes widened as my voice cut sharp and final. You told me to get out. I did. Now I'm back. And this time it's mine. The first weeks after signing the papers, the house felt like a wounded animal, broken, neglected, shivering under the weight of its own ruin. But I rolled up my sleeves and met it with patience. I painted the walls myself, layer by layer, covering years of grime with soft, warm colors. The floors, once warped and gray, gleamed again under polish. Every nail I hammered, every board I replaced, felt like reclaiming not just the home, but pieces of myself they had tried to erase. The garden had been overtaken by weeds, wild and choking. I spent days out there with gloves and sweat dripping down my back, pulling every root, planting anew. Tomatoes, peppers, and flowers returned to the soil, the same soil where I once bent as a girl under the hot sun while my father praised Malik for helping when he never lifted a hand. Now the rose stood proud and neat, and every bloom felt like defiance turned into beauty. Neighbors began stopping by, not with pity, but with admiration. They had watched the house fall apart under Malik's recklessness, and now they watched it rise again under my care. I didn't invite company in, though. This space was mine, sacred. For too long I had poured myself into others only to be forgotten. This time, I poured myself into walls and roots that could not betray me. From time to time, I saw them, my parents Malik, hovering on the edge of the property line. My father with his shoulders slumped, my mother with eyes red from tears, Malik looking like a shadow of the golden boy he once was. They stood outside, watching me repaint shutters, trim hedges, carry wood onto the porch. Sometimes they called out my name. Sometimes they said nothing at all, just stared with the heavy regret of people who only understood value after it was lost. I never shouted. I never gloated. I never even invited them onto the porch. The door remained closed to them, just as their hearts had once been closed to me. It wasn't revenge I craved, it was peace. And peace I had finally built, brick by brick, flower by flower. By summer's end, the house shone brighter than it had in decades. The porch boards were smooth and sturdy again, glowing in the evening light. I stood there one evening, barefoot, breathing in the scent of jasmine I had planted near the steps. Fireflies blinked in the yard, and the air was heavy with that golden quiet that only comes at dusk. I ran my hand along the porch railing, the same spot where my father had once leaned as he told me coldly to get out. My lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh. Softly, to the house, to myself, to the night, I whispered. I left without a word. Now I return without permission. And with that, I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, not to shut the world out, but to finally claim the home and the life that had always been mine. Do you believe Ayana made the right choice by shutting her family out for good? Or should she have given them another chance after everything they did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if stories like this resonate with you, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.